Welcome to the Mental Insights Podcast, a conversation aimed at understanding all sides of mental health, addiction recovery, and homelessness. Each interview will include one's personal experiences and insights, or an expert's advice and knowledge within one of these fields. The goal is to promote awareness, guidance, and support for anyone who is affected by these challenges. Thank you all for listening. Welcome back to the Mental Insights Podcast. We're here for part 2 of the episode, season 2, episode number 21 with Dr. Shawn Horn. We recently spoke about shame and how it can take place within generational relationships and what kind of impact that can have within our own mental health. And we ended off really speaking about the impact of community and environment and how that can really have a direct effect. And for someone who is experiencing shame, they may understand the concepts and the aspect of what shame truly is, but in order to take that next healing process, what is kind of the first step that you walk through someone in order to understand shame and move throughout that healing process?
It's really important that we understand that what we feel is not facts and what we think is not truths. And so when we transform our minds and we transform our mindset, we are changing our mindset from what we conform to. So what we conform to was the programming of what we were told, the stories we were given about who we are, what is possible for us, what's possible for our future. And we have to understand that that story was man-made, was human-made by the people that said it to you, the interaction between you and them, and your own inner processing. So to transform our mind, we have to take that story and detach from it. Now, our feelings are going to say, but those are facts. And our thoughts are going to say, but those are truths. And we have to say, no, feelings aren't facts and thoughts aren't truths. They're things. Thoughts and feelings inform us, but they're not meant to control us. So we have to unglue ourselves from that story. And really, it's almost like pretending you have amnesia and being open to a new possibility of, well, who am I? I totally forgot who I was. So who am I really? And in that way, we're guiding our feelings rather than following our feelings. So this is really important when people say, I don't know how to love myself. When they talk about self-love. To heal shame, you have to have self-compassion and self-love. Well, how the heck do you do that when you don't feel that way? Well, you hold the mindset of it, which is the act of loving someone. When you love someone, you want the best for them. You're kind to them. You are happy when they do things that are good. You're not keeping a list of everything they did wrong and reminding them all the time and wanting them to suffer and those kinds of things, right? So it's a posturing of our mind. Now, we can all think of people in our lives that we love, but we don't always love. Like sometimes we don't like them. And sometimes we might even feel like we hate them, but we love them. Well, how can you love someone you hate, right? It's how we behave with them, how we open doors for them, how we support them and encourage them. So for ourselves, we might say, I really don't like this part of my story. It's very painful for me. I don't like this aspect of something I struggle with that I'm so angry that I have. However, I am going to choose to love myself just like I choose to love my family members and my friends. And I'm going to encourage myself like this loving inner parent that when I am so frustrated, I have a more loving inner parent voice rather than an inner critic voice. So if the inner critic goes, how could you do that? It's so stupid. The loving parent would say, hey, let's learn from this. That was a hard lesson and that choice got you in trouble. But you know what? We can do it different next time. So come on, I believe in you. You can do it. Now, this is what we're going to do different next time. And so you learn lessons and you weave them into your life so that your future can be better for those lessons. So the key principle is that it's not a feeling. People get really stuck in that. They think, I don't know how not to feel shame. And it's okay, that's all right. We're going to move towards what we want, not what we don't want. So that's another huge principle that most people get caught up in. They go, I don't want this thing. But if you chase what you want, by default, that will get resolved. So if you don't want debt, then focus on building wealth. If you focus on building wealth, you're not going to charge stuff on your Visa because you're planning how much money you want to put in your savings. If you are wanting to lose weight, if you focus on health and being active and fit and eating foods that make you feel alive and vivacious and good, then you're not going to go eat the foods that are making your body hold weight. So it is the method that works more than any other method. Most of the time, what we resist persists. So when you go, oh, I don't want to go into debt, we just go into debt more because we'll start that tomorrow. Well, we'll just charge it today and we'll start that tomorrow. And the same with every other goal we have. And so focus on what you want to create and make sure that your thoughts, your actions, your self-talk is aligned with what you want to create. If what I want to create is peace and harmony, then is this thought supporting that? Is this word supporting that? Is this action supporting that? If no, then step away from it. If I want to have a healthy marriage, then is this thought supporting a healthy marriage? Action, words, no? Then we step away from it. And we really work on practicing getting our thoughts, minds, actions aligned with that what we want to create. So if we want to be free from shame, then we need to speak to ourselves in grace and with guidance, learn the lessons. We will make mistakes that we don't want to repeat, and that's okay. Learn the lessons from it and move forward and keep trying to be the best version of you and accept the version that's struggling at the same time.
Some great key points, I think, from what you're saying, and it's all valuable things that take time, as you're saying. It's not going to change overnight, and it's some things that you can learn from when you continue to make mistakes. It's going to happen. You're not going to recorrect every little mistake that you have, but it's about becoming aware of it, and then, as you're saying, acting through it. It's taking that initial step. And before, in the previous episode, you spoke about vulnerability and how that can play a big role in this. And shame prevents vulnerability in and of itself, because you try to hold within. And how can someone really work through gaining the courage to be vulnerable, to open up? You shared the story of your co-host being able to share her own experiences, and that takes a lot of courage. And how can someone really work through that and gaining that courage to be vulnerable, to start to heal from their own shame?
Hmm. This is a very good question. The first thing that comes to mind is that we do need to learn who are safe people and unsafe people. So the first time people start being vulnerable, it would not be advised. I would not advise someone to go into an environment that's abusive, emotionally abusive, rejecting, critical, and be vulnerable and say, I want you to know about the struggle I have, because they're going to get beat up and then regret ever doing that. So you want to go to environments that promote, we will support you and understand your struggle, because we struggle with that too. So if you go into environments where people are already sharing those kinds of stories, then you'll get that support you need. Now, as time goes on, you now weave that into yourself and you have that inner support with yourself. And it's kind of like grief, that when you first have a significant loss, you're raw, you talk about it, you cry, it's really activating. But over time, you can reflect on it and it's not as raw, it's not as activating. However, it is it's, you can experience it as the sadness it is and the remorse that you may have about that story, but you have a little more distance from it. So when people have worked through a lot of their own inner healing and they can really radically accept that story and that journey, radical acceptance is where you are saying it is what it is, and you're not resisting it. You're not trying to control something you can't control or change something you can't change. So let's take, for example, incest survivor who hid the story their whole life, and it's profoundly painful for them, shameful to them, that this was part of their story. And they now realized and did all this work that that was not their choice. It was, they were a victim of that circumstance, regardless of however it played out. And they are clear about that. And they've started to share with those that they're most intimate with that story. And those people loved them through it and really understood. But let's say they have an opportunity to talk about it. And maybe they talk about it in a support group with other people that are incest survivors. And so then it's a safe place. But maybe they talk about it on a stage. And a good rule of thumb is that if it's not really still raw and activating, then you can begin to talk about it. But if it's still really raw and activating, just hold off a little bit in talking about it until you feel you can handle the triggers of people saying toxic things to you or rejecting you. And so once you are prepared for that and you can handle that, then you can begin to publicly share your story, being prepared for if somebody comes to you and is hateful or abusive, that you are clear where to put that and you can tap into your own inner strength with that. And then it's okay. So there's different levels of vulnerability. You have vulnerability with your inner circle, you have vulnerability within your community, and then you have vulnerability for those that are taking more of a public role. I've taken more of a public role, so I've shared just about every vulnerable story I have this year that I didn't expect to share. And I had to work through those moments of when it gets triggered or activated, or when I'm aware that someone might judge me, how I'm going to support myself through that. And I'm able to say, you know what? It's all right. I radically accept this. I'm at peace with it. I know that God and I have worked through it, and God loves me, and I'm okay. And so I just let it be and let that be theirs to wrestle with and just, move on and balance it with some good stuff, some positive things, and feel good. You always got to keep your scales balanced. If you dug deep and you have an emotional hangover and a vulnerability hangover, you got to restore yourself a little bit and get yourself feeling strong again.
Wonderful, Shawn. I greatly appreciate it, and it speaks about how there's so many different avenues in which you can look at it personally, you can look at it as a community, and then as a public eye, and there's many different opportunities for us to heal through this, and there's many different steps that we need to take. It's, as we're saying, it's a long process, but eventually you can get to that point of sharing whatever you feel comfortable with, to make yourself vulnerable and to open up and allow yourself to lead other people to a better place in and of itself. And speaking about that position in which you could have people around you that are leaning more towards the toxic shame and trying to lay down your flaws and your mistakes and trying to pronounce those, how can someone look objectively, when they are identifying flaws and mistakes and, trying to take that next step forward without having it being such a, negative outlook from someone else in whatever, social circle or smaller community that they're in?
Mm-hmm. I teach a skill called the non-judgment skill, and this is a very helpful mindset to heal through this. And so judgment is looking at things black and white, good or bad, right or wrong, worthy or unworthy. And when we think along those lines, it creates a lot of problems for us. So instead of being judgmental, we want to describe. You can describe the harmful, the destructive, the negative. You can describe it and not judge it. So, for example, I can say, my body has excess weight on it and it's not good for my health, and I need to work on being healthier. Or I can judge it. Oh, I'm too fat. Look at this. I hate it. When am I going to lose this weight? I can say, when I'm with this person, I really struggle. They are so negative. They say a lot of negative things. I walk away feeling awful, and I really prefer not to spend time with that person. Or I can judge them and say, who the heck do they think they are? That person is disgusting, and I hate them, and I don't even want to be with them, not for a second. So judging is like you're describing, but you're putting this emotional intensity and a value to it, that because I have displeasure when I'm with this person, I'm now valuing them as less. And this is where opinions come in, because opinions are really our preference combined with a judgment. So let's say my preference is that someone doesn't have guns. My judgment is that if you are like, people who are informed won't have guns, people who aren't will. And therefore, my opinion is smart people don't have guns, and intelligent people have guns, right? Now, I don't have a judgment. I live in Spokane. Everybody has guns out here, so they're all hunters and all this stuff. So I'm just picking a hot topic to talk about how people get all prickly with these things, and this ends up being harmful because we end up generalizing whole groups, and then we can't resolve anything because we're generalizing. We're making these blanket statements about human beings. And then when that happens, people get defensive and they pull away. And then they go, that isn't me and that doesn't reflect me. So instead, we really want to be descriptive. What works, what doesn't work. And then focus on what I call the effectiveness skill, which is really focus on doing what is going to work within this context. Within these variables, what do I need to do to address this? Versus respond how you think it should be and it ought to be and it must be. Then we're resisting along with our judging of how things should be that aren't. So it doesn't matter if it is or isn't. I mean, it's just not. So if you're trying to make it this way, I mean, it's just totally irrational. It's not that way. So just focus on, what do I need to do given this situation? So when we adopt that mindset, we're able to clean up our messes a little bit better and the messes of other people, because we're describing it. This action was ineffective. This action would be more effective. This I learned from this mistake, I learned A, so I'm going to do B. And then you just do what you need to do versus getting caught up in the judgment land of good, bad, right, wrong, should, shouldn't, worthy, unworthy, and all that hot mess that's just going to make the water so muddy. So that's a really helpful skill.
Wonderful. Thank you, Shauna. I greatly appreciate that. And it leads into the question that I love to ask my guests as kind of a transition of what you've been able to learn and what you're currently doing now, which this is a hypothetical question that I ask my guests, in which you are provided a large sum of money, which you're able to allocate towards whatever, opportunities you want to help fix and help improve, whether it be specifically within the field of shame, whether it's in mental health as a whole. Where would you allocate, the resources of, say, $1 billion to really provide these resources and give us some insights into just, where would you want to allocate money in order to help fix some of the challenges that people are facing today?
That's such a good question. Well, okay, because I have a shame-free mindset. I know what that I don't know a lot of things, and I accept that about myself. So the first thing I would do is hire someone that could help guide me in that. Because it would be an unrealistic expectation for me to think that I would know the wisest and best place to put that money. I historically have not been a financial whiz. It hasn't been my strength. And so it would be wise for me to seek financial guidance, so that I didn't put on myself the expectation that I would be masterful with that amount of money, and know something that I don't know and that I should. So I think what that question really reveals is more my approach to that versus what I would do with it. Is that I would seek wisdom and seek guidance and look at what all my options were to impact and to help. And then as a collective, I don't think I could make a decision like that by myself. I would pray about it. I would pray that God brought people in my life to inform me about where God might want me to put that money. And I would recognize that money is not being mine, it's being God's, and being open to what shows up in that moment.
It's a wonderful answer, and it's certainly a new perspective on how you can take that initiative and help out people who may need it. So, if that day comes, I look forward to seeing when that when that happens and where that money is allocated. So I want to thank you for taking this time with me today, Shawn. It was truly a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
And thank you all for listening. This was season 2, episode number 21 with Dr. Shawn Horn. And below in the show notes, you can reach her own website, her contact information, as well as her podcast that she co hosts, and get in tune more with what she is doing today in the realm of mental health and shame. So thank you all for being here today. This was your host, Brendan.cutuli. Thank you all for listening to today's episode of the Mental Insights Podcast. Make sure to reach out to today's guest or myself if you need any advice, guidance, or support in your life today. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and review to this podcast so we know what you thought of this episode. I look forward to being in touch with you all in the next episode. I hope you all have a wonderful day.